Hi, everyone, and thank you for watching this video on measuring the health of the economy. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the second economic goal, which is high employment. So how do we measure high employment? Well, we do that by looking at the unemployment rate. So the unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that's unemployed and actively seeking work. It does not include children or minors, does not include the elderly or anyone out of work who cannot work for whatever reason or choose not to work. It's only looking at those who are unemployed and actively seeking work. So as the unemployment rate goes up, that typically means that the economy is in a decline. And as that unemployment rate goes down, meaning there are less people out of work, it means the economy is expanding. So a country's unemployment level is one of the most important economic indicators that there is. Let me go ahead and show you why. When we look at the GDP over the last 35 years, starting in 1990, we can see that consistently the GDP has risen every year. So if you were to look at the statistic alone, you would say our economy is rock solid. We have never had a decline. Everything looks amazing. Now, obviously, we did have a decline. Let me go ahead and preface that. We did have a decline in 2008 with the housing crisis and then in 2020, but we bounced back. All of our companies bounced back. We're selling more products than ever before. Our economy is just solid. We set records in the last few years, right? However, the unemployment rate paints a very different picture. Now, if our GDP has been going up exponentially every year, consistently year after year, you would think that our unemployment rate would be consistent as well. If we're selling more products and services, companies should be doing well. Um, we shouldn't have fluctuations on our unemployment rate. But if you were to look at these unemployment statistics over the last 35 years during the same time period, you can see that it's very inconsistent, starting off in the early 1990s. So anytime there is a rise, we want the chart to be low. So we don't want high unemployment rates, right? So anytime there's a peak, that means that there's an economic either a recession or something going on in the economy at that time because companies are laying people off and people are out of work. So in the early 1990s, we had a 7.5% unemployment rate, which is pretty high. Economists say that we want to try to keep that unemployment rate at 5% or lower. So anything under 5% typically means that the economy is doing well. So we can see we had a couple different bumps along the way. We set an all-time low record in 2000 for unemployment at that time at 4%. So prior to the year 2000, we had never had an unemployment rate as low as we did at that time period, so 4%. This time period is an interesting one. You can see that just by 2003, that unemployment rate rose to 5.8%. If you know what happened back in 2000 with the dot-com bubble and Y2K, a lot of companies were hiring, gearing up for a lot of transition in technology. They hired a lot of people, and then once they got through that transition, they realized that they had too many people and they laid a lot of the workforce off. And so that's why you see that rise in 2003 with an unemployment rate of 5.8%. Now it did go back down again, and everything was going the right direction until the housing crisis. So of course, the housing crisis not only affected the housing market, it also affected Wall Street, a lot of different things, and it affected people's jobs. If you look at this, we had the highest unemployment rate of all time in 2008, 2009 time period at 9.3%. Now, I say all time. Now, we did have obviously the Great Depression back in the 1930s, the unemployment rate was much higher. Let me go ahead and preface that by saying in modern US corporate history, the last 35 years, this was the highest unemployment rate on record. Now, after this time period, you can see that the economy started to bounce back and was headed in the right direction. We want to see these numbers decline. We want low numbers. And everything was going really well until the 2020 pandemic, and we had that global shutdown. You can see that 8.1% of our population was then out of work. Now, when we look at this 8.1%, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about this number. This is the average for the year in 2020. There was actually a time period right after the shutdown in, I want to say June, where we had a high unemployment rate of 15%. 15% of our population was unemployed and actively seeking work. I want to go ahead and preface that because when we say 15%, there was a discussion about how a lot of people were not actively seeking work. They were unemployed. They're just not, going back to work. They're doing other things, making TikToks, selling on, just going to the influencer lifestyle. So this 8.1% and that 15% high in June, I think it was June or July, that did not include those people. That number, that 15%, were only including those who were unemployed and actively seeking work. So just to keep that in mind. Now, look as quickly as that number rose in 2020, 8.1%, it actually fell quite quickly. And so our economy did bounce back. We had some great prosperity after 2020. If you look at these numbers and the GDP, you can see that things were extremely solid. We had, again, record-breaking GDP from after the 2020 shutdown. And not only that, we had record-breaking low employment. So the lowest up until this point was 2019 at 3.7%. And then after the pandemic, it only took us a couple years to get back to that area of below 3.7%. So we're looking at in 2022, we had 3.6%. And then in 2023, it beat that record of 3.4%. So we had the lowest all-time unemployment rate in the United States in 2023. So the economy is going well, it's going strong, everything is going in the right direction. However, there's one more economic indicator that we need to look at that might paint yet a different picture. So we have, again, the GDP, we have the unemployment rate, and now we're going to look at the consumer price index, which takes a look at inflation. And this inflation might also be able to explain why our unemployment rate rose in 2024. Because technically, when you look at 2024 gross domestic product, the numbers there, you can see that we set an all-time high at 29 trillion with a 2.8% increase. It looks like our economy is going well, but the unemployment rate rose, meaning companies laid off more people in 2024 than they did in 2023. I wonder why that is. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our next video, the Consumer Price Index and inflation.